Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about how you can get out of a reading slump. So a few weeks ago, or maybe a few days ago, recently, I made a video talking about a look back on my reading from 5 years ago in 2015. That year, I was like one of my worst reading years ever, and it really was the catalyst for a very long reading slump for me. It was almost like a 2-year long reading slump. And so that got me thinking about some things that had helped me at different times in my life of beating reading slumps, and I thought they might be helpful for you too. So we're going to talk about those today. So I have some books here that are kind of examples, and I have 10 ways to help yourself get out of a reading slump if that's what you find yourself to be in right now. So the first thing that I want to say is one of the things that helped me most get out of a reading slump was letting go of what other people think about what I read. Like, stop worrying about if people are going to think it's stupid, if they're going to make fun of you about it, if they're going to think it's not literary enough, if it's going to get you views, if you have a bookstagram or a booktube. Just stop worrying about what other people think about what you read. Like, that is my number one tip, and it is honestly, I think, sometimes the hardest thing to get past, because we all want, we want approval of others. And especially, I feel like, not especially, but if you have any kind of a book presence, it can be really hard to not feel pressure to read a certain type of book, or, things like that. But also, if you like reading something, like I'm going to use myself as an example, one of the things I noticed in that video was that I wasn't reading hardly any romance, and that was entirely because I felt like I was being judged by others, and because of that fear, I wasn't enjoying what I was reading, and reading wasn't fun for me anymore. So instead of picking up a book, I was like scrolling the internet or something like that, watching TV, and that never makes me feel as good or as like mentally healthy as reading a book does. Like, watching TV isn't really a break for me. I kind of find it stressful, to be honest. I don't really like watching TV. And scrolling the internet is just really bad. Like, we're going to talk about that later. So, that's my biggest tip. If possible, if you are guilty of this, let go of what other people think about what you read. Who cares? They don't matter. You matter. Pick what you want to read and just do it. So my actual number one tip is to read an old favorite. So this is something that I did several years ago when I was really struggling to find books that I was enjoying, and I just kind of felt like I didn't know what author or what book was going to make me want to read again. And so what I reached for was an old standby. Whether you love her or hate her, this book worked for me, and that was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I love Sarah J. Maas. I really do. I think her stories are fantastic. I love how she's so great at building a really rich fantasy world and really rich relationships. I really love her romance. That is true. Absolutely love her romance. But there's just something about this series specifically that is so readable and immersive for me. And every time I pick this up, I think I've read it 3 times. I think I've read the whole series 3 times. Every time I read it, I find myself just completely lost and captivated and just want to read all the time. So I know for some people rereading isn't something that they enjoy or that they really want to do. And so all of these tips are things that have worked for me. They might not work for you. Maybe one of them will, or maybe one of them won't. But they all will maybe help get your brain working in a way to help you get past that I don't feel like reading. So rereading an old favorite is one for me. For many years, it was Twilight. I would reread Twilight all the time until I got so sick of it. But I loved Twilight. I loved the feeling. It was the same way. It was just an immersive reading experience where I could just get completely sucked in and lost. So this has been my most recent reread that has given me that experience and has broken a reading rut for me. So give it a try. Reread an old favorite. And my next tip is to change genres. Now, I know that I kind of said don't worry about what other people are thinking about what you're reading, but sometimes I find specifically sometimes, not all the time, but if I stay in one specific genre or subgenre, I kind of can get burned out a little bit sometimes, and so it takes me kind of going outside of that and picking something else. So maybe you read a lot of historical romance and you find yourself kind of getting burned out on that. Then maybe try a dark contemporary romance. You can stay within that genre, but just try branching out. Or you could try like a paranormal romance, you could try like a rom-com. There are so many different subgenres in that would, I feel like, help you find something different that you would still enjoy. Or if that's still not working and you really don't want to try that at all, then really branch out and try something that's just completely different, you know? I know a lot of people like nonfiction. That is not something that is ever going to get me out of a reading slump, but you could try nonfiction. If you feel yourself drawn to that, try nonfiction. If you read all YA, you know, maybe you read a lot of YA fantasy, maybe try an adult fantasy, or maybe try an adult thriller or an adult mystery. I feel like some of the genres that are the best for me to break out of and kind of get rid of that reading slump are usually things that are fast-paced or have a strong emotional reaction. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But one book that recently did this for me that kind of helped me, I wasn't really in a reading slump, but this was a book that was not anything I normally would have picked up. And when I did, I was completely sucked into this book and literally read it in one sitting. It is a pretty short one, and that is Follow Me to Ground. This is a literary fiction. I don't know if it's even magical realism. It's a very odd, weird, fantastical book. It's not really fantasy, but it's really weird. It's a weird book. There is some magical elements and it really doesn't make any sense, so I guess it would be magical realism. Anyway, this is about a girl and her parent who are basically healers of this community, and the way that they heal people is by doing stuff to their bodies and then burying them in the ground. The whole concept is that the ground is healing them. It was honestly so interesting to me, and not anything I ever would have bought for myself or picked up for myself, but I did this as part of a book club with my friend Rain from Brews and Binds, and it was really, really, really immersive. It sucked me in. I was completely hooked, and when I finished it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So this is one of those examples where when you go outside of what you normally read, it can almost kind of flip a switch in your brain and get you thinking about books in a different way and excite you about other books that you maybe wouldn't have tried, or maybe even help you approach the books that you usually read with a new appreciation and sort of like a fresh eye. That's what this book did for me. This book was bonkers, and if you want something completely different that is very emotional and unsettling and weird, like, pick this up. This is probably going to be on one of my top books of the weird book. It's not like a favorite, but it was like, what the heck did I just read? That kind of thing. Okay, and my next tip kind of goes along with that the second one, is to pick something that is like pick something that's really funny. Pick something that is very mysterious, or something that's over the top romantic. Something that has a really strong emotional hit in it, you know? Like, I feel like if another thing that helps me when I have a reading slump is to pick like something that has a mystery aspect to it, because that will generally always want me to keep turning pages if there's some type of mystery aspect. And something else is that something that is just like a really powerful, really emotional romance, not necessarily emotional in a sad way, but something that just kind of grips you and you just are feeling so many feelings about this couple. That's what I mean. And also sometimes like something that's just unexpectedly funny. Like, I really love Christina Lauren's rom-coms. They're rom-coms like Josh and Hazel, Roomies, The Unhoneymooners even. Those are, and even like Penny Reed I feel like she does rom-coms really, really well. Whenever I feel like I'm kind of feeling a little heavy, I'll reach for one of those authors and read their books, because I know that that's kind of a reaction that I'm going to get, that I'm going to really enjoy. So I feel like the third tip, picking something that will give you that sort of over-the-top emotional response, is a great way to get out of a reading slump. And one of my favorite authors who does that is Sarah McLean. I haven't read this book. This is one of hers I haven't read. I'm saving this for when I feel like I'm getting slumpy, or just when I feel like nothing else is appealing to me. I keep a few of her books saved for that reason, because I know that she is one of my favorite authors and I can always trust what's going to happen in her books, that I'm going to get the emotional satisfaction that I want out of reading her. Okay, and my next tip is to try a buddy read, a group read, a book club, a readathon, a reading challenge, something that is going to sort of make you read. If your problem is just struggling to pick up a book, something that can be helpful, maybe, I know not always, not everybody likes to have like goals associated with their reading, but if you are any type of a goal person, or maybe even like you like rules and structure, I think this one would really, really help you. Something that has really elevated my reading experience, I've talked about it in several other videos, is joining buddy reads and group reads. And one in particular is Dana Quadraro and Bookish Kelly. They started a group read this summer for the Summer of Sarah McLean. I joined in at the last part of it just to read this series, and it was so enjoyable for me. And even just having that accountability of knowing, okay, we have to read this much and then we're going to talk about it, was such motivation for me to pick up this book every single day instead of getting online and just doom scrolling the whole time. So that was something that was super great for me. And another thing that will do is probably help you find authors or books that you wouldn't have picked up. This book was given to me by Librarians and Labradors. I'll link her below. You should go follow her because she's super sweet and she's a new booktuber. But I discovered Cressley Cole, who has recently become a favorite author because of that buddy read group. They were talking about Immortals After Dark, and I had never read it, and everyone decided to do a group read, and so I participated, and now she's one of my favorite authors. I adore these books. I'm so glad that I got involved in that buddy read, because otherwise I would not have picked this up, and I would not have found that I love it. And so I'm a big fan of readathons and buddy reads, any type of reading challenge. I just love it. I think that it's really good to help you read instead of just wasting time doing something else, if reading's important to you, which I'm guessing it probably is if you're watching this video. And that brings me to my next tip. Number 6 is to turn your phone off. Stop doom scrolling. Stop wasting time online. Stop browsing the internet, just turn your phone off. I feel like whenever I find that I'm really not reading as much as I like to, and I'm not necessarily as happy or relaxed, it's because I'm scrolling on my phone more than I'm actually reading. And I know it's like a super hard habit to break, and I am as guilty as anybody of being like completely sucked into social media and getting addicted to it. It's a problem, but I feel so much better when I put my stupid phone down and pick up a book instead. And that's one reason why I love having physical books, is because then you don't have the option of just hopping over to a social media site. The book is right here, put your phone away, and just read. So this is probably something that I am very guilty of, and I feel like a lot of people maybe are, and it's super helpful to just put the stupid phone down and pick up a book instead. And my next tip is to try an audiobook. And even to try an audiobook by different narrators, because I feel like some people feel like they don't like audiobooks when really probably what they don't like is the narrator, or maybe that author's writing isn't as easily translatable into an audio format as it is into a visual reading format. I feel like one of the best ways to get out of reading slumps is to find a fantastic audiobook, and sometimes that can be hard, but to find a really great audiobook that you are excited about, that you want to just listen to. And if you're a very busy person, but you can do like your work, whether it's your day job or work at home or chores around the house or whatever, or maybe during your commute, if you can have an audiobook playing, I feel like that will really help your love of reading come back, and it could help you get out of reading slumps. Some of my favorite audiobooks are ones that are actually like thrillers and mysteries. Like I love Riley Sager's audiobooks, but that's not something that I'm probably going to sit down and read because they're thrillers, and if I have time to sit down and read, I'm gonna read a romance because that's what I want to read. But I love having that option of an audiobook so that when I can't sit down and read, but I can still be listening, I have that to go to. So audiobooks, I think, are great for helping you get out of reading ruts. And my next tip is read a book that you loved as a kid. So I loved reading as a kid. Probably a lot of you loved reading as a kid, and I feel like we all had those books that were our favorites. And maybe even you don't have to go back as far as to when you're a kid. Maybe you read a book that you loved when you were a teen. But I feel like if we can revisit those times when reading was just so magical to us and it was just such a fun enjoyable time, it helps us to remember how much we love reading and puts us back in that frame of mind to enjoy it today. So one of my favorite books as a kid was the Black Stallion series. I loved them. I read all of them. I read them multiple times. My mom would always try to encourage me to read other authors, and I was like, no, I just want to read this over and over and over and over and over. Were you like that too? But as an adult, I have been trying to find these old covers that I remember from my childhood on eBay and things like that, because they have illustrations I remember on the inside and just the covers and the smell of them, and they're just so comforting. And I actually did read a Black Stallion book last summer when I was just really trying to get that nostalgic love of reading back again, and it totally worked. So this one I think is a really fun one to do, and this would also go along with like the audio book option too, because some of these children's books are narrated so well. Like one of my favorite children's books is Matilda by Roald Dahl, and that's narrated by Kate Winslet. And let me just tell you, it is a freaking delight to listen to that book. It's so good. She narrates that so well. And me and my kids would sometimes listen to audiobooks in the car as we were, taking them to practice or whatever. And another one of our favorites was The One and Only Ivan, which I know has been made into a movie. But that audiobook was narrated so well, and even my kids, who aren't big readers, loved it and adored it. To this day, they remember that book. There's just a lot of power in kids' books, especially. And I feel like if you want to combine this with the audiobook aspect, that might be really fun, because there are some really, really wonderful audiobook narrators that are for kids' books. And I feel like that part of the reason is because they're trying to engage these children right away. And if you're in a reading slump, you might need that. So look into that. Okay, my next tip, number 9, is to read a book that you have recently bought or borrowed from the library that is brand new to you, that you are really excited about, and forget about your TBR. I think sometimes we, and I'm guilty of this too, fall into the trap of feeling like we have to read things. We have to read things for review. We have to read things because we have a buddy read promise, or we told people we were going to read this, and we get so caught up in that doesn't end up being the thing that we want to read. And just maybe getting a new book, whether you buy it or whether you borrow it, can really be an exciting experience and get you really hyped to read again. So just the other day, I got this book in the mail, The Widow of Rose House. I saw this recommended by Izzy from Happy for Now Books. I will link her channel down below. She's the reason I bought this. I saw this come in the mail and I was like, I want to drop everything and read that right now. Now, I'm not in a reading slump right now, so I didn't, but I'm gonna read this soon because I'm so excited about it. And my last tip, number 10, is to try reading short stories, either through an anthology or, even better, a novella. I feel like sometimes, and this I'm talking about myself here, we equate satisfaction with reading with getting things read. I'm that way, at least. And sometimes the idea of reading like a 400, 500 page book can be so daunting that we maybe don't pick it up. Whereas I feel like a novella or a short story is very easily accessible, and it's something that we know we can read within a few hours and feel like we've accomplished something. But also I feel like it's a really good low-risk way to try out new genres, new authors, things that are new to you, and a lot of times trying something new is just the spark that you need to get excited to read again. So those are my 10 tips. I hope they were helpful. I would love to know your thoughts and things that you have done that have worked for you to get out of reading slumps in the past. And also let me know if you feel like this list is helpful. I'd love to know that too. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. We'll see you in my next video.